then.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
Started.
thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to this council meeting of the City and County of Swansea. It's Thursday the 27th of January 2022. First item on the agenda this evening is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have apologies from Councillors Andrew Stevens, Lyndon Jones and Mayhill Langston. Any others?
If not, on to item 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. I'll ask the motion officer, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I circulated an email yesterday evening as to interests for tonight's council meeting. Just to draw to your attention 2 matters on the agenda. First of all, in relation to agenda item 14, which is the nomination of Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor-elect. If you are a nominee listed in the recommendations, I would suggest that you declare a personal and prejudicial interest and you leave the meeting, and he will call you back in at the appropriate time. I don't consider that you have an interest simply because you know we'll work alongside the nominees. And then secondly, in relation to agenda item 12, the councillors' ICT allowances policy, as this report does contain financial allowances, I'll take a block declaration from all councillors present for a personal interest only. That will include all those councillors that are not standing for re-election. It's much easier for us to take a block declaration from all councillors who are present. So I will ask all councillors, with your indulgence, to indicate by raising their hand whether they wish to declare an interest. But as I say, we will note all those that are present as declaring a personal interest. Personal interest only for agenda item 12, which is the councillors' ICT allowances policy.
Okay. Second, there's a mixture of virtual hands and actual hands. Okay.
Are there any other interests?
Right, I'm going to ask now for any other interest. Can I ask those now who've just declared an interest in that item that the monitor officer mentioned, lower your virtual hands, please. Online. You can't all want to speak, surely. Okay, I'll go through in turn. Then Councillor Graham Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Item 14, personal and prejudicial, and I'll leave the meeting.
Councillor Alison Peel.
Yeah, is it item 8, the personal and what's the other word I'm looking for? The prejudicial interest in now, please. Do I have to leave, or do I just declare that?
No, councillor, you will have to leave the meeting and he will call you back in. So that's
okay.
Just declaring a personal and prejudicial interest in agenda item 8, adoption of the council tax reduction scheme. Thank you, councillor.
Thanks.
All right.
Sorry, Chair, yeah, council tax reduction. That's a personal interest only.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Stewart.
Yeah, Chair, item 14, personal prejudicial, and I'll leave the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Day.
Item 14, Presiding Member, personal and prejudicial, and I will leave the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Child.
Councillor's question number 6. I'm a member of the Health Board, a personal interest only declaring.
Councillor Peter Black.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As well as a personal interest in item 12, a personal interest in item 14, nomination of Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Mandy Evans.
Thank you. Excuse me. Personal interest in item 9, private sector housing renewal and disabled adaptations policy. Thank you.
Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Personal and prejudicial in item 14, and I'll leave the meeting.
Finally, Councillor Penny Matthews.
Thank you. Item 8, both interests, and I leave the meeting.
Councillor Andrea Lewis.
As well as the personal item 12, personal only item 14, close personal associate named in the report.
Thank you. Right, can I ask those who don't want their hands? Alison, do you want another?
No, sorry, I didn't lay down.
Councillor Chris Molly.
Thank you, Presiding Member. 12, personal only in 12 and 14.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Gerald Philpott.
Yeah, job declaration as suggested for item 12, but a personal interest for item 14.
Gerald. And that just remains Wendy Fitzgerald. Still got your hand up?
Yes, Chair, I think I need to declare for item 12, personal interest. Sorry, I've been having problems getting it on my screen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Francis Davis.
Yeah, personal interest in item 14.
Right, that concludes the disclosures. On to item 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes, and it's to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meetings as correct record, pages 1 to 7. First one is Thursday, the 2nd of December, page 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. You.
Happy to move, Chair.
It's a correct record, thank you. And seconded, yes, well, I'm happy that they were correct record. Thank you very much. Okay, item 4, written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of council. There were none. And item 5 then is my announcement to the presiding member. I have a number this evening. Fortunately, we do not have any announcements of condolences this month, so nobody close to us has passed away, thank goodness. So on a happier note, I'd like to mention the New Year's Honours. Now, these are citizens of Swansea who have received awards in the New Year's Honours. And the person who has been awarded the Commander of the Order of the British Empire, which is the OBE, goes to Professor Tavi Murray, who's Professor of Glaciology at Swansea University, and it's for services to glaciology and climate change research. And then it's an officer of the Order of the British Empire, again an OBE, goes to Michael John Walters, who's the Lifeboat Operations Manager of the Lachan Inshore Lifeboat, and that's for services to the community in Swansea. And then the member of the Order of the British Empire, the MVE, goes to the Reverend Stephen Bunton, who's the Vicar of St Thomas Church, and that's for charitable services to the community in Swansea. It also goes to Alison Williams, who's the head teacher of Rugville School, which is it's for services to education in the community of Swansea. Also, the MBE goes to Dr. Edward Morgan Robertsdale, and that's for services to medicine and to the community in Swansea and to Nathan Buttalbert. So, congratulations to all those who received those honours in the New Year's Honours list. And then, happy announcement, and this is in reference to the Sequel Awards, and it's in reference to the Kingsway Urban Park. And Sequel is the world-leading sustainability assessment, rating and award scheme for civil engineering, infrastructure, landscaping and public realm projects. And the BRE category has verified and ratified that the Kingsway Urban Park has achieved the Sequel Award. This is the first Sequel assessment that has been completed, and the first to achieve a pass. Actually, they've exceeded this, getting a good. Okay, and this is in the areas assessed under this award. It's for client, design and construction, and for the scheme, and that was for project management, people and communities, land use and landscape, historic environment, ecology and biodiversity, waste environment, water environment, physical resources use in the environment, and transport. So therefore, congratulations to all involved in the Kingsway project. It certainly looks like it must be. And then, most of you are aware, today is National Commemoration Day for the Holocaust Memorial Day. Okay, and it's dedicated to the remembrance of the 6 million Jews who lost their lives in the Holocaust, the demise of millions more who suffered under Nazi persecution, and the genocides that followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. 27th of January is the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau, and together we bear witness for all those who were murdered and persecuted, and we honour the survivors of those regimes and all those whose lives were changed beyond recognition. There is still more we can do to ensure that we live in the world free from discrimination, hostility, and persecution. The Holocaust shook the foundations of civilization, and it is up to us to ensure this is never forgotten. The memory of those who lost their lives live on for generations to come. The Council, in conjunction with schools, the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education, which is SACRA, Swansea Interfaith Forum, and Norma Glass MBE have pre-recorded a ceremony which is available on the Council's Facebook page, which you can now view. So I invite all members of Council to pause for a moment of reflection to remember those who lost their lives to the Holocaust and subsequent genocides. Okay, thank you for that. And to coincide with the ceremony that's taking place in Swansea at 6 o'clock, I will light a candle at 6 p.m, as I say, to coincide with that ceremony on behalf of the Council. Okay, so we give a watch for 6 o'clock. Okay, and now corrections to amendments to the Council summons. Item 11, right, which is the honorary freedom of the City and County of Swansea. This item has been deferred due to the fact it would be very difficult to arrange a ceremonial council within a limited period in light of the pre-election period starting in March 22. Also, the ongoing COVID restrictions and a number of other ceremonial councils having to take priority, i.e. the Lord Mayor and the Merchant Navy, and of course the election in May. Our council constitution states that all decisions shall be implemented within 6 months of the date of the decision being made. I believe we will struggle to hold a ceremonial council within 6 months. Therefore, it's proposed that we defer item 11 this evening, okay, which is the honorary freedom item on the agenda. Okay, item 12, which is the Council's ICT policy, allowance policy, May 22 and beyond. Appendix A, paragraph 8 refers to the Data Protection Act 1998. So please amend the year from that to read 2018. Okay, it's not 1998, it's 2018. And then item 15, membership of committees. There's an additional amendment. Standards Committee vacancy panel, please add Mike Lewis, which is Standard Committee statutory committee, and add Councillor Phil Crawford. Okay, that just an amendment to the membership of committees, item 15. That concludes my announcements. I now call on Councillor Rob Stewart for leaders' announcements under item 6 of our agenda. Councillor Stewart, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. First announcement from me tonight is a very positive one, and Members who were just in the council meeting that we've had will know that we have taken a decision to appoint Mr. Smith as our new finance director. Can I, on behalf of all members, congratulate Mr. Smith on his appointment to Director of Finance. Those who know Mr. Smith will know he's no ordinary finance director or finance officer. He has the trick of making finance interesting and easily understandable. I think we've all been impressed with what Mr. Smith has been able to do to support us in terms of our decision making over the last few years, and I'm sure we all wish him the very best in his role as our new finance director. And perhaps, Chair, if I pause there for a second and we give Mr. Smith the opportunity to come in.
Yes,
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Presiding Member. I would repeat what I said in Extraordinary Council. I've been doing this job for over 30 years. I've done just shy of a week of 13 years in Swansea, and it's been an honour and privilege to serve the council, and I'm thrilled to be able to continue to serve the council. And I've had great luck and great opportunity, and I hope that continues for all of you as councillors and the council as a whole. And again, I thank you very much and for your kind and very warm words. Thank you ever so much to all of you. Thank you.
Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Can I reinforce what the leader said? And I know we all know that the delicate arts that are local government finance are well operated by Mr. Smith, and he has been a great asset to this council. And I look forward to him being here for a number of years to come. And congratulations on behalf of, I think, everybody in the council.
Okay. David Phillips with his hand up. David, is it on this subject? No. Councillor David Phillips? No. Okay. Councillor Will Thomas.
Thank you, President Member. Yes, Ben, congratulations. I think, not only, as Rob said, you make finance fun, and, you've done a great job for the council, and, you've also saved the people and taxpayers of Swansea a huge amount of money with your skills and borrowing. So congratulations, well done.
Thank you, Will. Okay. Leader.
Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, if I might, Chairman, sorry, my hand was up from before. I didn't get called because I'm having problems with my connection of declaring a personal interest in item 12.
David, I had no response. What do you want to say, David?
I'm having a problem with my connection, Chairman. I couldn't get in before. We were taking declaration of interest because I wanted to make a personal interest in item 12.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Leader?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Following on from the remarks about Mr. Smith, I also wanted to pay tribute to his finance team and all of the officers working in that department again, who've been exceptional in helping business grants get out to the businesses in Swansea as quickly as possible. We know that further monies have been made available by the Welsh Government for the most recent lockdown period, and I know the team has done again an exceptional job in terms of turning around applications and getting money out the door. So again, I wanted to place on record our thanks to the team there who have again done an exceptional job. My next announcement, Chair, was just to respond really to the Mayhill learning review that was published earlier this week. You will know that Elwyn Evans QC, Jack Straw and Martin Jones were the review panel who oversaw that review. From a council perspective, obviously, we fully accepted the recommendations in there, and are very grateful to Adam Hill and other officers who put together a very, very comprehensive series of documents for the review panel to consider. We are content with the recommendations that are there, and also we were very appreciative of the swift apology that the police made to the community. Again, I would repeat what I've said previously in the fact that the events that happened last year on Mayhill and in Winewen were not reflective of the communities of Winewen and Mayhill. People who came to that area from across the city and elsewhere should quite rightly be pursued by the police, and I hope that the CPS and police are able to make arrests and prosecutions very soon. And from our part, obviously, I know that the local members in both Town Hill and in Castle have been in regular contact with residents, have been working to engage with residents on the hill about what they would like to see in terms of the redesigned area and what additional facilities they would like to see in that area. And I know that we're planning to release details of that very soon. And I'm very grateful to the work that the local councillors are doing there to support their communities, and I know the community are appreciative of that as well. So, I think it's now for the police to consider the recommendations in that report, and obviously specifically the main request around a further forensic review, and I'm sure the police will respond on that in due course. But I am on behalf of the council very grateful for the work that was being undertaken by the review team, and obviously as a council we accept all of the recommendations that are in it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Councillor David Hopkins.
Yeah, thanks, Presiding Member. I just want to put on record at this time, we had no intention of coming in, but I think it'd be rather remiss of me to thank Councillor Rob Stewart for his leadership, his help throughout this difficult time, and particularly, and I speak on behalf of all my ward colleagues, that the assistance he's given us throughout these difficult times, and I really, really do appreciate the efforts gone in since. So, Rob, heartfelt thanks to myself and my ward colleagues.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Okay, Councillor Stewart, that concludes your announcement.
That concludes my announcements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, on to public question time. Okay, remind everyone, questions must be submitted in writing no later than noon on the working day prior to this meeting. Questions must relate to items on the agenda, and questions will be dealt within a 10-minute period. Okay, so the first questioner is Rebecca Francis Davis. Rebecca, ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you. As resident in Uplands, I was really happy to see the new homes in Uplands open. Could the Cabinet member give an update on the investment in other council homes across Swansea, please?
Thank you, Rebecca. Councillor Andrea Lewis.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you very much to the questioner. It seems a very simple question and a very short, brief question, but actually I'm afraid the response is quite lengthy, which is really positive in terms of the investment that we put into council homes. The response to the councillor question reveals a very detailed update on the investment across Swansea in terms of the Welsh Housing Quality Standard. I'm really proud to say that we've invested over £500 million in our council homes, and we'll continue to upgrade and invest those in terms of energy efficiency, doors, windows, roofs, enveloping, and the external works, kitchens and bathrooms. In addition to that, I really do welcome the new builds and the builds which are in progress. So if I can just give as brief as I can, Chair, but Presiding Member, but it's a very lengthy list in terms of the investment. So the questioner did mention the investment in Bryn House. I think it's fair to say that's been a significant transformation. Bryn House itself turned into and converted into 4 flats. 2 of those are disability accessible. We've got in total at this time around 58 new builds and 38 acquisitions, 18 at Collier's Way, 16 at Parker Helig, a further 18 in phase 2 at Collier Way, 2 at Acacia Road, 20 phase 2 acquisitions of 1-bedroom flats. A lot of those are council right to buy, which we bought back into our stock. 3 integrated care fund acquisitions for accessible accommodation, and 15 further more homes acquisitions. That's completed, and what's in programme and underway, we have a further 4 passive house pods, which are temporary accommodation at Bryn House in the heart of Bryn in the heart of Uplands, which will be used to enable people to move into supported accommodation and permanent accommodation. So they're meant to be short-term temporary emergency lets. We've got 25 homes planned at Hillview with a handover in March and 3 further units in May. We've got 3 homes due for completion this spring at Tea Forest. We've got 6 bungalows in West Cross at the Circle, and we start on site there in February, early March. We've got 2 3-bedroom houses on Alexandra Road, Gorsainon, 20 acquisitions which will be completed with 19 under offer at the moment, and 6 further ICF acquisitions for accessible accommodation. Creswell Road sees plans for a further 9 homes. Hale Dinas, 20 homes. Spark Centre will have 1 3-bedroom house and 2 accessible apartments with the detailed design being worked up. And Brontic House will see 14 units with the detailed design being worked up currently. We've got 4 sites at Brooksby Road, and we're looking to appoint consultants to develop the master plan of the 4 sites. The tender is to be awarded this week. We've got 2 further sites at Milford Way. And I could go on, Chairman. We've got Skirledge, Skomer and Westdale, Penrose Place, Tanacoid Road, Heelgarossies, and we will be working closely with the General Fund in terms of bringing and purchasing some General Fund sites, bringing them into the HRA in order that we can place much needed social housing in areas where we don't currently have HRA land, such as Swansea West and the Gower. So I think it's a fairly impressive report, Presiding Member. I'm really proud to bring that detail here today. And if there's anything further requested from the questioner, I'm more than happy to provide any further details. Thank you, Presiding Member, and sorry for the lengthy response.
So, thank you, Andrea. Very interesting. Thank you. Okay, and now we've got Mark Davis. Please, Mark, do you want to ask your question, please? I understand you submitted 2 questions. Can I ask the first one first?
Thank you. Can the leader confirm if the answer to question 11 asked by Councillors Day, Jones, Black and Holly is correct? And why can Liberal Democrat members simply choose not to attend meetings that they are elected to participate in?
Leader?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mr Davis, I can absolutely confirm that the response to that is correct. I think it will be, as I've said in my response there, it's probably surprising to the electorate out there that elected members can choose which things they participate in and which they don't. I've had, conversations in the chamber prior to this with Councillor Holly and others around whether Liberal Democrats will take part in the policy development committees. For information for those who are not familiar with the work, I've always, and we said as when we became an administration in 2017, we wanted to try and recreate the circumstances whereby all members of this council could participate in the work of the councils, because we felt, regardless of who's elected, we have an obligation across all councillors to try and work in the best interests of the city. Now, the only way that really we could see to do that was to make sure that we had committees that everybody could participate in. So the policy commitments of this council, which are to the benefit of all communities, could be delivered in collaboration with members, whichever party they were elected for, and whichever area of the council they are. I am very disappointed that despite 5 years now of urging of the Liberal Democrats to participate in policy development committees, they haven't agreed to nominate to those committees, and therefore they haven't participated in any of the committees that have been held over the last 5 years. And, had the election results have been different and had a different administration have been elected, I'm sure Labour members would have participated in the work of those committees, because when you're elected, I've always believed that you take on the work that the electorate expect you to do, and that for me is participating in all of the structures of the committee and being therefore elected. So I am disappointed that the Liberal Democrats feel that they can just refuse to participate in the work of the committee, and I'm sure the electorate will make a judgment on that when we come to May the 5th.
Okay, Mr. James, your second question, which is very similar to the first, but go ahead and ask.
Thank you. Does the leader feel that the Liberal Democrat stance in refusing to attend meetings where policy decisions are made which affect the people of Swansea is appropriate?
No, I don't. And it's been a point of discussion in this chamber, before COVID and throughout the last 5 years. As I said, when in terms of how the public view politics, they will make their determination on who leads Swansea, on who the administration is. But once that decision is made, they expect us all to work together. We will have different views on how we get to do certain things, but I don't think any member of the electorate, whatever party they support, will expect their politicians to just say, no, we're not going to participate. No, we're not going to do that. And it's a point of principle here that when you're elected, if there's a committee set up where you can, as an elected member, make a difference for the people of Swansea, where you can help deliver for the people of Swansea, just deciding you're going to take your ball and go home and not play is not an acceptable position. So, I do think it's not a sensible position. I do not think it's appropriate for the Lib Dems to not participate. And I do say, whatever the makeup of the council is after May the 5th, if we are the administration and we set up committees, I do hope the Liberal Democrats will participate and discharge their electoral duties.
Peter. Okay, thank you to the questioners for participating in the public question session. Indeed, that's 9 minutes, well done. Okay, item 8 on the agenda is the adoption of the council tax reduction scheme according to the section 151 officer, Mr. Ben Smith. Ben?
Thank you, presiding member. This is one of my drier reports, but a vitally important one for the reasons I will draw to your attention in a moment. And I'm acutely conscious that you have a notice of motion on later, which, although ostensibly about the energy crisis, also references cost of living and such other matters. So I will restrict myself to the technical advice, but draw your attention to the report, which will set out 5 recommendations, which I'll come back to at the end. Section 1.3 makes clear that each local authority in Wales must reconsider its scheme by the 31st of January each year, and that is why it's in front of you. Section 1.4 makes clear that although it's a national scheme, there are discretionary elements that allow councils to be more generous, and I will refer to those briefly in a moment in due course. Section 1.7 did indicate we were on a very tight timeline with the Senedd. I'm pleased to advise the regulations went through unchanged, so I have no updates to give you in terms of the report on the night, and so that is helpful. Section 2.3 makes clear that the recommendations are unchanged, so there is no need to consult again on it. The table after section 3.5 indicates the discretionary elements, which are in line with the previous discretionary elements. And I draw your attention finally to the financial implications, which are set out fully, how the CTRS scheme is funded. It is a fixed funded scheme, predominantly funded by Welsh Government, but is indeed topped up by this council and all taxpayers able to pay council tax to ensure those on the lowest incomes are protected from the increases. And I draw your attention particularly to the sheer numbers who are current council tax reduction recipients and the number who receive 100% relief. And I think that is pertinent and important given some of the other debates you're going to have later on. And finally, I draw attention to 5.5. The decision before you today is to adopt the CTRS scheme. It's not about the levels of council tax in itself, but that does clearly draw your attention to how much any decision in due course as a cabinet recommendation and ultimately council impacts on the overall level of council tax. Put bluntly, part of council tax is paid for by those who are able to pay to subsidise rightly those who are least able to pay. So that's it in terms of my technical advice. Steady as she goes, relatively straightforward. It indicates the costs and they will all be built into the budget proposals. So I will hand back to you, Leader, and would recommend that you consider moving the 5 recommendations as stated, but I'm sure you'll wish to comment further on the report. Thank you.
Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for that. I'm very, very happy to move the recommendations that Mr. Smith has spoken to, but I just wanted to add to that. I mean, just turning this into, how this will help the people of Swansea. And, as Mr. Smith alluded to, we do have a very important motion to discuss later on, but this is a really important scheme, primarily funded by Welsh Government, but as Mr Smith said, it's something that we top up locally so that we can help as many households as possible, as many families as possible to deal with the burden. And of course, with the impinging cost of living crisis, any help that we can give locally will be really, really helpful. Just to put that into numbers, this is circa £23 million of help going out to families across Swansea. 22,000 households will benefit from this help, of which 18,000 of those households will get the full 100% tax relief. Now that will be a huge help to 18,000 homes across Swansea in what will be probably one of the most difficult financial years they have ever had. So I'm very proud that we are doing this. I'm very proud to see this support coming from Welsh Government. I'm sure, you know, many other parts of the UK will look to see the sorts of measures that we're taking here in Wales and here in Swansea with envious eyes. And I'm very, very pleased that as a council we are able to do this. So thank you, Chair. With that, I'll formally remove the report.
Call on Councillor Andrea Lewis to second the motion, please.
Very happy to second, presiding member.
Thank you, Andrea. You'll be indicating to speak. Ask Mr Evans to take the vote, please.
Thank you, presiding member. The vote has been launched. To see the vote. We need to vote verbally. So, Councillor Will Evans.
Yeah, support.
Hopkins. Councillor Phil Downing.
Yeah, could you check with mine, Chair? It came up on my screen twice.
No, the first vote I launched in air, I withdrew it immediately. So you should have had a vote saying number 8, adoption of the council tax reduction scheme. So you voted for it, against, or you abstaining?
Yeah, for it.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
For.
Councillor Mark Thomas.
For.
Are there any others that need to cast a verbal? Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Any others? I've captured
yes,
everybody.
You. David Phillips.
Okay, your hand wasn't raised. So how do you vote, David?
For.
Any others? Oh, I got you all now.
Under the votes, can you call me, Hugh, because the poll is not appearing on my screen.
Okay, so raise your hand when I come to that item and I'll call you in. Okay, everybody, I'll just close the poll. Give me a moment. And that is unanimous for, presiding member.
Okay, thank you, Mr Evans. Item 9 is the private sector housing renewal and disabled adaptations, and its policy to provide assistance for 2022 through to 2027. And again, for Councillor Andrea Lewis, please.
Thank you, presiding member. First of all, happy to move this report. As members will no doubt be aware, this is a regular policy that comes before council every few years. But this today isn't simply a rollover and a repetition of a previous policy. There is a major change that's contained in this one. So if I could just highlight point 3 of this report, we will see the removal of the means test for small to medium disabled facility grants. This is following a review that was carried out by Wales Audit Office in 2018, where they discovered that actually the means test was a significant barrier to people applying for grants. And so they interviewed several residents and members of the public across Wales, and then reported back to Welsh Government, and Welsh Government advised local authorities accordingly that we should actually seek to remove the means test for small to medium grants, which is what we have approved at a recent Cabinet meeting. So I'm just drawing members' attention to it. It should make the process for applicants much faster, much easier, and remove those barriers to application. However, there is a consideration that it might actually make the waiting list and the lists longer, so we do need to keep a close eye on that. Welsh Government also recognised that this could come at a cost to councils, and so they've set aside a budget across Swansea of £238,000 to compensate for that. We will of course access that as necessary, but I'm very happy to move the report. What this does is it helps people to live independently in their own homes for longer, and that is why we as a council and we as a Cabinet and an administration have continued to put significant investment into these capital grants so that people can live safely and comfortably in their own homes for longer. So very happy to move the report, Presiding Member, and happy to take any questions as appropriate.
Thank you. If anything to ask, Councillor Rob Steele, seconded, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very happy to formally second.
Okay, the recommendations on page 23. Take the vote, please.
Okay, the vote has been launched. Okay, does anybody need to vote verbally, please? Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Yes, for. It hasn't come up on my screen. The
okay. Councillor David Phillips. Councillor David Phillips.
For.
Councillor Penny Matthews.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon. Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Councillor Irene Mann.
For.
Councillor, I think that's everybody, I think. Councillor Bev Hopkins.
For.
Is there anybody else needing to cast a verbal vote? No? Okay. Apologies, my votes are jumping for some reason. Apologies for that. And that again is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, item 10 on our agenda this evening is the Waste Strategy 2022 to 2025. I call upon Councillor Mark Thomas, please. Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present this report to Council today and move the recommendation that Council adopts the 2022 to 2025 waste strategy. Before we do that, I'd like to draw particular attention to some items within the report that require, further attention. Firstly, the report shows how it must align to current UK and Welsh Government policies and legislation, and importantly as well to our corporate policy of maintaining and enhancing our natural resources and biodiversity. The main feature of the report is contained within Appendix A, and I can go on to that now if you allow me to, Chair. The Welsh Government strategy is now titled Beyond Recycling, to take us towards a circular economy and zero waste by 2050. Sections 2.1 and 2.2 outlines how that will be achieved, with Section 2.3 is more about the local context to this. Section 3 shows how we have come from a 45% recycling rate to our current rate of about 64% over the last decade or so, and the changes introduced to achieve that. Sections 4, 5 and 6 covers what we currently do, our vision for the next 3 years and beyond, and the challenges to meet our next Welsh Government targets. Our next target is 70% recycling by 2024-25. We believe we are on target to meet this challenge, and one of the main contributors to this will be our move away from landfill to energy from waste. I'm proud to say that during February, as promised to the residents of St Thomas and surrounding area, we will not be sending any more waste for landfill to this site. We will also be refocusing on our Keep It Out campaign, as well as looking at continuing with our reuse projects and looking for new and innovative ways to reuse or recycle even more products. And that promise, as I said, to the residents of St Thomas and the neighbouring community is going to ensure I'm very welcome within that area and locality. Section 7 covers the financial implications of this strategy. The main impact is that there will be increased costs to moving away from landfill initially, but I'm minded there may be an adjustment for this in the forthcoming budget process. Section 8 looks at future potential challenges and changes, some of them beyond 2005 and the lifetime of this report. Chair, I would like to conclude by paying my utmost respect and gratitude to the crew, staff and management of our waste services that have continued with the business as usual approach to our collection service. To have reached our targets highlighted during the report under any circumstances is a big achievement, but to have hit our targets through almost 2 years of a pandemic is nothing short of heroic. Chair, I move the report and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Mark. I've got a question now. Whoever seconded first, I understand David Hopkins is going to second it, David.
Yeah, happy to formally second, presiding member.
Thank you, David. Councillor Clyde.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member, and can I thank Councillor Thomas for presenting this report and speaking tonight, particularly on behalf of the St Thomas and Portennant community. I'd just like to remind Council of where we were prior to 2012 and all the sorts of issues that I was finding when I was campaigning on the doorstep about concerns about the running and management of the Tir John landfill site, which at the time was in the hands of arm's length company, the local authority waste disposal company. I'm pleased to say, and I'm proud to say, that this administration took those concerns extremely seriously, and very shortly after we were elected as an administration in 2012, we sent our own in-house officers into the local authority waste disposal site at Tir John. And spent a significant amount of time resolving the many issues that were not only a concern for the residents of St Thomas, but also Natural Resources Wales at the time. Not only that, we took the decision as an administration to bring the workforce back in-house, and I'm pleased to say that for the remainder of the time that the council has been running Tir John landfill site as an in-house operation, the number of times that I've had any complaints about anything going on with Tir John has reduced significantly, and I think that's a huge credit to the management and to the workforce, and it just backs up the decision that council is best bringing things back in-house, doing things on behalf of the people, for the people, is the best way to go, rather than outsourcing and running these operations as arm's length companies. So I thank Councillor Thomas for making this, presenting this report tonight, and on behalf of the communities of St Thomas and Portennant particularly, that have had to put up with the landfill site on their doorstep for many, many years, we look forward to it finally closing and moving on, and we'll see what transpires with the capping and the conclusion of the site post this contract. So thank you, Councillor Thomas, and thanks to the Labour administration for doing all this work and making sure that we leave the community in the best possible position.
Thank you, Clive. Councillor Joe Hill. Joe?
Yeah, thanks very much. And just like to echo Clive's words, the community for such a long time in Portennant and St Thomas, most notably Portennant, have put up with what the rest of Swansea doesn't want. And very, very pleased by this report. Pleased the community, the hard working in the main community, and pleased for what it offers to future generations. And future generations of Pleasant and St Thomas, which in itself is entering into a new era. And we are so pleased to see tears gone, finally gone. Many of the stinks and the smells, the irritations that our residents have had here, 30 odd years, through no fault of their own, through the fact that another part of Swansea didn't want it. And of course, when you're in an area of high potency and low influence, you get certain decisions going against. This one is such a start. Thanks to the Cabinet members and thanks to the Labour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Peter Jones. Peter? You're muted, Peter.
Yeah. Try again. Thank you, presiding member. I'm finding my control over the mute button very erratic, so I hope it will survive what I'm going to say. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Thomas and his officers on an excellent report and the importance of it, because what I think this report shows is the role that local government can play in addressing global problems. And resource depletion, of course, is a global problem. Therefore, the role that we as a local authority and other local authorities are able to play in contributing to recycling and also, of course, to reduce, reuse, and the other hierarchical ways of addressing resource depletion is to be welcomed. Some of us, including me, are old enough to remember the Club of Rome, as it was called, back in the early 1970s, which produced a series of reports which suggested that by the early 2000s, all other things being equal, the planet would be seriously depleted across a whole range of resources, including food, minerals, and so forth. And thankfully, that hasn't happened. And that hasn't happened for all sorts of reasons. And one of those reasons is certainly recycling and a more careful approach to the management of resources as we go forward. So global resource depletion is a serious issue, and we must have regard to it. I'm very appreciative, therefore, of the role this council is playing in addressing a serious global problem. Thank you, Mark Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Irene Nunn.
I'd just like to take... Oh, hello. I'd just like the opportunity to thank Councillor Mark Thomas for all the help and support he's given the residents and myself in the uplands. And again, reinforce what he said with reference to the heroic efforts of the cleansing teams. The gentlemen on the ground are absolutely fabulous, and the management is fabulous also. That's all I'd like to say, but many thanks to Mark for all his support and help in the last few years. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Erin. Councillor Linda Taylor-Lloyd.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to the men who come and collect the waste and have done all through the pandemic
And women.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I've been on the machine actually. They let me go on the machine of the depot, and I was sort of escorted by one of the ladies. But I just want to say that they think I'm quite crazy because I run out in my pajamas and dressing gown on a waste day and throw biscuits and chocolates at them just to show appreciation. So I would just like to say, please, everybody else do the same, because they are so delighted to actually be appreciated. So that's all I want to say. I appreciate them anyway. Thank you.
Terry. You're on mute, Terry.
Hi Mark, I bought a house in Hall Street in Portena many years ago, and we faced that sort of smell and everything that goes with it day in, day out. I called it negativity. However, since this is happening and it's called SC1, it looks like the house prices will go through the moon. I'm delighted. Well done.
Councillor Will Thomas. Will.
Sorry, Chair, I was on mute there. Thank you. Mark, just a technical question. Just looking at the report, obviously looks like we're trying to move to sort of zero waste as soon as possible. I think 2050 is the target there. Obviously, it's inevitable that some of our waste goes to landfill. I couldn't see in the report, or I was just wondering if you could tell us where, what does that landfill look like? Where does it go? Where are the landfill sites that we use? Because I know I've seen, I think it was a Panorama show a while back where some councils were selling some of their waste overseas. I'm just wondering, I'm sure we don't, I hope, but just wondering if we do sell any of our waste overseas, or where our waste land ends up, really. So have you got an answer for that for me, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, well, if I could, Chair, yeah, I mean, none of our waste from now on, from February on, will be going to landfill anywhere. All of our waste will be going to energy from waste facilities, but unfortunately at this time, we are still in the procurement process, and that I'm not able to announce the successful outcome of that contract. So that all forms part, because to enable us to move away from the landfill site at Tir John, we have entered into a procurement exercise of, bids and contract negotiations for someone to take over that and for all of our waste to be treated as energy from waste. That is in the final throes as we speak, but that process has not been completed. So I'm not in a position to tell you any details about that because I don't know them myself yet. But I can assure you and everybody else, and in Swansea, none of our waste at all will be going to any future landfill sites. It's energy from waste where it is treated, under license, within all the government restrictions and control, and that is seen as the Welsh Government's preferred method of disposal, because in a few years' time, landfill sites in Wales will not be able, no authority in Wales will be able to take more than 5% of its waste to any landfill site anyway. So landfill sites are being phased out. So we will not be using landfill sites for our residual waste after February.
Can I ask a follow-up question very quickly, Chair?
Can we just pause there at the moment? It's within seconds of 6 o'clock. Just going to we am. Okay, we'll leave that burn now for the rest of the meeting. Okay, sorry, Will, go ahead.
No, totally. Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. When you say energy is waste, can you just explain? There's obviously some things which are impossible to recycle. I'm just struggling to wrap my head around what happens to those things that are, impossible to recycle. I mean, surely they still go to landfill.
No, that's not what happens. Currently, as you said, yeah, everything we collect, 64% of it is being recycled. So that leaves 30% of our waste that we collect is what is called residual waste, or the black bag waste, effectively. Up until now, we have been taking that black bag waste to a hole in the ground in St. Thomas and burying it. In future, that same black bag waste will go to plants where this is burnt, effectively, and turned into energy. It's a well-used process. It's a well-controlled and licensed process. It's common. In fact, I think something like 20 of the 22 unitary authorities in Wales already use that process. So this is not unusual and certainly not unique to Swansea. And out of that, the waste product that is created is what they call bottom ash. And in fact, we as a council will get recycling rate from that, because that bottom ash is then used in the construction industry. I think it goes into things like cement making or something like that. It's a reuse product rather than a waste product. So out of that, you create energy which goes into the grid, which powers electricity, and the waste product effectively is then reused in the building industry. So nothing, and that's why I was confident to say none of that waste ends up in landfill.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor Rob Stewart.
Yeah, Chair, I'd just like to echo the comments of others, not just to our waste teams and the way in which they've operated and how they perform, but also to Councillor Thomas himself. He's done a fantastic job throughout this pandemic and before then in the driving up the waste and recycling rates across the city. And just to remind members, Swansea is a high-performing authority in this area. 64.5% of our waste at the last check was recycled. And you compare that with the English average of just 44%. That's the difference. I mean, Wales is a world leader in this. We know that. I think Wales has the third best recycling rates of any country around the world. And that is a tribute to the way in which the Welsh Government and how seriously Welsh Government and Welsh councils take recycling and our commitments on climate change. So my thanks on that. And just locally for St. Thomas, I want to pay tribute to the work that Councillor Clive Lloyd and Joe Hale have done in making sure that they reminded the council of its obligations around Tir John. And I was very pleased, of course, in the last budget to commit to providing £150,000 for the communities of St. Thomas and nearby communities, so that, as Councillor Hale said, for the disruption they have faced over many years, they're now able to get a benefit back. And I know Councillor Hale and Councillor Lloyd are working with the community on how that £150,000 can be utilised within those communities. So thank you, Chair.
Councillor Matthew Jones. Matthew.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And yeah, again, it was a pleasure to read that report, and credit goes to Mark Thomas and the team there. I think over the pandemic, I think we realised quite a few things, haven't we? And it's who we value in our frontline services and through the NHS. And while a lot of us were told maybe to go home and work from home, these men and women, ladies and gentlemen, got the refuse off our streets. And I know from a fact, there's one thing the residents of Swansea won't put up with, and that's refuse left on the streets for days on end. And that never happened through challenging times, through shortages in workforce with minimal disruption. So yeah, I'd like to echo what my colleagues have said here tonight, and big hands up to the refuse and recycling crews, and big respect to them in what they've done over the last 2 years.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Andrea Lewis.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'd also like to add my tributes to the Cabinet Member. I know that he's been working on this for a long time, and I'm sure he's really pleased to get to this stage. So well done to him and to the teams and everybody involved. Members will know that the current site has permission, cabinet approval for a 3 megawatt solar farm, which I think tells a good story in itself. And I look forward, obviously subject to the relevant permissions, to hopefully increasing and adding to that solar farm, and because there is a potential for 10 megawatts on that site. Of course, there will be attached community benefits if that does happen. And just as a point of information, the residue which is left over is referred to in the trade as clinker, and can be used in roads, presiding member. So nothing is wasted. And I know that Councillor Hopkins and myself had an excellent visit at the Cardiff facility, which was really, really professionally run. And if anybody has a chance to go to an energy from waste facility, I recommend that they do take up that offer, because these sites are subject to so many restrictions and things in place, and it is definitely the best option, especially when you compare it to landfill. And so well done to the cabinet member and all involved, and my thanks to all the refuse teams who have been our heroes, along with the rest of council workers throughout this pandemic.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, no one else? So thank you all for those very kind remarks to the Waste Department. Mark, I hope you'll convey them back to the department. Okay, it's been moved by Mark, seconded by Councillor David Hopkins. Mr. Evans, should we take the vote, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. The vote has been launched. Give it a couple of moments. Okay, for those unable to vote electronically, can you raise your virtual hands and I'll call your names to take a verbal vote. So, Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor David Phillips.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Sorry, I lost it. Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
For.
Councillor Rob Stewart.
For.
Councillor Bev Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Councillor Oliver James.
For.
The Penny Matthews.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Graham Thomas.
For.
Have I missed any other councillor? Everyone's been able to vote? Thank you very much. And that is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, item 11 has been deferred. Item 12 is Councillor's ICT allowance policy, May 2022 and beyond. Sorry, please. Head of Democratic Services.
Thank you, Presiding Member. This report has been through the Democratic Services Committee. It has also been through a group comprising the political group leaders, their deputies, and others identified from within their political groups. Since it's been presented to Dem Services Committee back in January, we've been able to put in the figures from the head of Digital and Customer Services, which is outlining the proposed amounts for 2022 and beyond. I have nothing to add to the report other than what's in it, and I'm happy to take any questions should you have any.
Are there any questions? Yes. Councillor Nick Davis. Nick?
Yeah, presiding member, I missed the start of the meeting and was therefore unable to make a verbal declaration of interest, which I'm now doing.
Okay, thank you. No other questions, so straight to the vote. Please.
Thank you very much. Okay, the vote has been launched. Okay, I will take any verbal votes. Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Bev Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
For.
Councillor, can you lower your hands after you voted, please? Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor David Phillips.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Graham Thomas.
For.
I think I've
Paulette Smith.
I did. Sorry, Councillor Penny Matthews.
For.
Is there any other councillor that needs to declare a verbal vote? Okay. I apologize for the slight delay. I'm equally having a bit of a funny time with my computer this evening. Right. I have the vote is for, but there are abstentions. Presiding member.
Thank you. Okay. Item 13 on our agenda is reviewing the council's handbook. Jane, it's headed Democratic Services. Mr. Evans, please.
Thank you, presiding member. Okay. This report again has been through the Democratic Services Committee back in January. We've carried into review of the sections A to C of the handbook. The handbook is in place to try and make it easier for councillors and co-opted members to understand what they need to do to follow certain policies and processes. The changes are outlined in the appendices, and as tracked changes, I'm nothing further to add to the report, asking you to adopt those changes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I call on Councillor Linda James to propose the report, please? Linda?
Thank you, presiding member. I'd like to propose that the council accepts the recommendations put forward by the Democratic Services Committee.
Thank you very much. Second.
Happy to chair. Happy to second, chair.
First, proposed and seconded. Councillor Jen Rayner.
Thank you, presiding member. A question, and apologise if it's lost in the text somewhere. We're being asked to accept the recommendations, especially appendices A and B. What is the start date for this document? Is it now or next May?
It's immediate, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? To the vote, please, Mr. Evans.
Right, the vote has been launched. Okay, I'll take any verbal votes. Councillor Will Evans. Councillor Will Evans. Councillor Wendy Lewis.
For.
Councillor Will Evans, for.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
If you could lower your hand after you voted, please. Councillor Beverly Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Graham Thomas.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor David Phillips.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
And Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
I think I've captured every. Have I missed anybody? I've taken all the names up. Is that everybody? Okay. I should look close.
Chair, sorry, I haven't voted. I can't get it up this time at all. I'm for.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald.
I can't vote either, I'm sorry. It's Penny it is.
And how are you voting, Councillor Matthews?
For, please.
Are there any other councillors before I close the poll? Okay, the poll is closed, and that is unanimous, all for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 14 on our agenda is nominations of Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor elect for 2024 to 2025.
Chair, just before you proceed, we're going to leave those who declared an interest.
Chair, can I put a belated change to my declaration, please? It's Chair Philpott here. Guilty of not reading the report properly. Quite surprised to see my name there, so I gather I should be declaring a personal and prejudicial interest, and I will leave. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yes, those who declared a prejudicial interest, if you'd leave the meeting, please. We'll call you back. Mr. Evans.
Okay, thank you. The report before you is in line with the Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor protocol. Because it's a year of a local government election, we put 5 names forward, because obviously some councillors may choose to stand down, may not be returned. All of the names in front of you have been, in line with the policy, have been checked with the political group leaders and their deputies to ensure that they meet the criteria, and they all meet that criteria. So I've got nothing further to add to the report. Obviously, after the election, this could end up leading to a drawing of polls, because some of the councillors do have the same length of service, but that's an issue for us to worry about after the election.
Sorry, Chairman, if I may come in for a minute, I should also declare an interest in this. Councillor Paxton and Williams, both personal and prejudicial, and forget I'm here at the moment. I go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paxton. Okay, call on Councillor Chris Holly to propose, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have great pleasure in proposing the report as it is written.
Thank you. And Councillor Mary Jones, the second, or Councillor Peter Black, I don't know.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. Oh, I did have some hands up, but they disappeared. Andrea, did you have your hand up?
I was going to second the report, but it's been done, Presiding Member.
Okay, thank you. What else are they doing? Jen Green, did you have your hand up? No mute, Jen.
I don't see my hand up at all.
Oh, okay, I thought it was up. Okay, my mistake, sorry.
Right.
Okay, straight open, Sir Evans.
Thank you. The vote has been launched. Okay, I'll take any verbal votes for those who didn't get the e-vote. So firstly, Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
For.
Councillor Bev Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
4.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
4.
Councillor David Phillips.
4.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
4.
Are there any other councillors that haven't raised their hands and are unable to vote? Councillor Penny Matthews. Councillor Penny Matthews. Councillor Matthews.
4.
4. Councillor Phillips, you've still got your hand. You still got an issue, Councillor Phillips?
I'm sorry, hearing keeps popping up on its own.
Okay, so everybody's managed to vote. That reassures me. I shall close the poll. Give me a moment. That is unanimous 4. But if you give me a moment now, before we move to the next item, for me to call everybody back in.
A good idea.
There's a few of us though. Not nearly there. The one to go, last one. There you are. Everyone's back in.
Okay, excellent. Okay, item 15 on our agenda is management committees. Can I call on Councillor David Hopkins, please?
Yeah, thanks, Presiding Member. It gives me great pleasure to move the report with the amendments that was in your announcement previously.
Thank you. And Councillor Stewart, to second.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. No questions. Straight to the vote, please, Mr. Evans.
Okay, the vote has been launched. I'll give you a moment. The vote comes through. Okay, for those who haven't received the vote, I'll take your verbal vote. Councillor Will Evans.
4.
Councillor Bev Hopkins.
4.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
4.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
4.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
4.
Councillor David Phillips.
4.
Councillor Graham Thomas.
4.
And finally, Councillor Fiona Gordon.
4.
Any other councillors that haven't raised their hands and were unable to vote? No. Excellent. I shall close the poll. Be a moment. And that is unanimous 4.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Item 16 is from our agenda, scrutiny dispatches impact report. My follow from Councillor Peter Black, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I once more thank all those officers and members who've taken part in the scrutiny process, which remains a very important part of the Council's work and certainly, hopefully, ensures that we are keeping on top of things and doing things properly. I'm happy to answer any questions, but otherwise I'm happy to allow you to note the report.
Okay, thank you, Peter. No hands going up for questions. Therefore, the report is for information. Okay, we take us straight on to councillors' questions. 30 minutes begins now. 18:25. And first question is from Chris Hotley. Chris, any supplementaries?
Yes, Presiding Member, I've got a few supplementaries. In the answer to the question, the leader has said, yes, we've always given consideration to the Future Generations Act in decision making. I wonder if you could provide some evidence of that, because since 2016, every budget that's been up until now has been the policy framework of Sustainable Swansea Fit for the Future. Now, he knows and I know that policy is actually coming to an end this year. So where's the evidence? Because looking through all the budget papers, there's only one line in which it says anything about the Future Generations Act. And I was wondering, where is the evidence that that has been considered?
Yeah, more than happy to answer that. Look, Councillor Holly will be aware that the Future Generations Act is legislation. We have to adhere to it, but regardless of it being legislation, we choose to adhere to it because it is actually about those long-term decision making. So when we come to any decision in this council, we do look at the long-term impacts, not just the short-term benefits that may be there from that decision. And we do so in trying to balance the needs of the immediate delivery of that policy or that decision with the impact that it may have on future generations or on the city and county longer term. And in that basis, you know, it is embedded in all of our decision making. You'll be aware that in terms of this council, we've had a PDC which is also focused on future generations, and we also had cabinet member specific responsibility for future generations as part of the term. So it is something now embedded in all of our services and all of our decision making. It is something that we bear full regard to in terms of our decision making. So it isn't something that just applies to one decision, Councillor Holly, it applies to all. But of course, in various degrees, it will apply depending on the scale and impact of the decisions that we make. So, you know, it's again, if Councillor Holly has a specific example where he feels it hasn't been applied, then I'm more than happy to have that discussion with him.
Yeah, I think you know, if you look at the Act, and it's called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act Wales 2015, Part 2, Section 5, Paragraph 1, in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle, means that the body, which is the council, meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, given the fact that we altered the MRP, the medium-term financial plan, to allow an extra borrowing of £10 million in 2025-26, do you think we've actually broken the law? I know it's Welsh law, and I think I need to ask the monitoring officer what the consequences of that are, because it does appear on the face of it that when the original cabinet report, the 15th of October 2013, Sustainable Swansea Fit for the Future was a policy framework for the medium-term financial plan, but for budget as opposed to anything else. So I accept the fact of what you're saying, that there's very little evidence that, you know, the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act is embedded in, because, as I say, in the you've used a framework and a policy framework which is actually about budget. So that what I find hard to understand is, and I think you will accept what I'm saying, that if you look at the cabinet reports, if you look at what the Future Generation Act is saying, it does appear that by our actions we have put the future generations at risk because of the fact that we have altered our borrowing requirements, and that in 2025, 26, and maybe 26, 27 now, there will be a future load in over £10 million on our borrowing requirement.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hawley. No, I don't agree, and I don't accept the context of the question. I'm sure you didn't mean to infer that the legal officer or the finance officer would have given us advice which was incompatible with the law, and I'm sure both the legal officer and the newly appointed finance director will be able to give you clarification on that. You will know that the MTFP is merely a view of a potential future. It's our best view of what the next 3 or 4 years could be. And to say it's a strategy, it doesn't commit the council to those decisions over that period. And of course, every budget is set every year by this council on the basis of what we have. You'll know as well, in terms of all of the feeds to that, we've got the annual, up until recently, annual setting of amounts for the Welsh Government by the UK Government and the Treasury, and of course the Welsh Government providing annual budgets to local government. And you'll be aware, Councillor Hawley, that we've been through a long period of austerity which began by the coalition government formed by the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in London. In terms of dealing with that, of course, we had to take the best decisions possible, and that meant at some point within that process adapting our strategy and making sure that the borrowing that we've taken is something that is sensible and appropriate for this council at that time. What Mr. Smith has said in recent updates to us, of course, which I'm sure he'll be happy to comment on now, is in terms of the borrowing that we've taken out, it is one that's in line with the officer advice that Mr. Smith has given. It is one where we've amended our repayments, and I know you've referenced, I'm sure that's what you were referencing, which is how we were going to deal with MRP over the period. And I think Mr. Smith has been very clear that it's a cost neutral over the period of the MRP, sorry. And that, yes, it does change the profile, but overall it is a cost neutral action. The other thing I would say, in terms of overall borrowing, Councillor Hawley, we have continued to pay back over £40 million worth of expensive historic borrowing taken out under the previous administrations, both Liberal Democrat and before that. And we've replaced it with prudent low-cost borrowing, historically low-cost borrowing, which Mr. Smith again has pointed to. And I think the most recent comments from the Fed in America and other central banks around the world, it is likely that we will see interest rates rise over the coming period. And I think the decision to borrow the amount we borrowed at the time we borrowed and lock it in at the most attractive rate possible, I don't think there's any better deal we could have done for the people of Swansea. So we've actually replaced really expensive borrowing with really cheap borrowing. That's reduced the long-term burden on the people of Swansea. So again, I'll cede to Mr. Smith to give you some further information, and of course Ms. Meredith, if she wishes to come in terms of any of the legal that you mentioned.
With respect, Leader, what I'm asking you is, at the end of the day, the Cabinet make a decision, Council vote on the proposal. Now, you accept advice of officers. Officers can give you, I don't know what the advice they give you in corporate briefing. I know the advice they give you publicly, that's fair enough. But, it does look, if you look at it in the plain, simple language, it does look as if the council has actually gone against the Well-being of the Future Generations Act, and that is the point I'm trying to get over to you, and that is that it does look that way. I accept the fact that the advice given by Mr. Smith and by the monitoring officer would, if you like, negate what this act is saying. And I think that's a question that we would need to explore elsewhere. Sorry,
Councillor Hawley. Sorry to get across. Okay, finish the point, Chris.
Every council repays debt, and I accept what you're saying. When that debt was taken, it could have been taken out in 1960. It could have been taken out in 2010. So I accept what you're saying. We have to repay that debt, and it is. There were historic rates, higher rates then, and as I told you Napoleon said, is he a good general or is he a lucky one? And you know, you've been lucky with the interest rates. So in that respect, you know, good luck to you. You've had very cheap interest rates and you've been able to borrow it. But that's the point I'm trying to get over, is we need to understand that what we've done has not gone against the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. Thank you.
Yeah. And sorry again, Councillor Holly, just to come back very clearly on this, we would not bring a report to Cabinet or Council which was unlawful. It's a basic point. There, you know, in every report, whether it comes to Cabinet or Council, there are always legal implications stated in that report, and at every time the officers would not allow an unlawful report to come before either Cabinet or Council. So I think in that respect it's absolutely not the case, Councillor Holly. You can take a view as to whether or not the level of borrowing is something you would support if you were taking that decision. That is entirely an appropriate opinion you can hold. But again, you know, just to put it in figure, yes, there is historic borrowing that we inherited. I believe £83 million from your administration, which was borrowed at interest rates up to 4 times what we've borrowed at. So again, you know, when you compare the decisions we made, I think they are robust and they are ones that do not place a heavy burden on future generations.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I just asked the question. I don't think it's appropriate to be asking Mr. Smith to come in on a political discussion, to be perfectly honest with you, but that's up to you.
One officer. Chris. Ben, please. Smith, Ben.
I think he's celebrating his promotion.
Okay.
You can't blame him, leave him stay out of it. David and Jeff, would they say something? So leave them say.
Jeff, Councillor Jeff Jones.
Oh, Ben's back.
Oh, Ben. Ben, do you want to make a...
Yes, very briefly, and apologies for freezing. That I would remind that the decision was one at council on my advice around the MRP. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act requires to have due regard. It doesn't block council making decisions, and I think council has mitigated it by also taking my advice, which was to set aside any of the sums saved into the capital equalisation reserve to smooth the costs. The other bit I would give in terms of advice is I confirm the leader's statement that it is a zero cost over the lifetime, and further, the change to a fixed life aligned with the use of the assets means that future generations will pay for part of the MRP and will benefit from enjoying the use of those assets. If it had been left on the reducing balance basis, it would have been disproportionately burdensome to early years taxpayers. The bit that I think would, if it hadn't been for the mitigation around the capital equalisation reserve and saving the MRP savings, I think there would be more of a case to consider, because many authorities across the border in England went for very exotic MRP arrangements where they declared themselves able to have no MRP and clearly pass a burden on to future generations. I'll probably say no more than that in terms of the technical advice, because I do accept Councillor Holly's point that this is a political discussion predominantly, but I hope that clarifies the advice I've given previously and is of some use to councillors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, thanks, Presiding Officer, and thanks to the leader really for the response, and congratulations to Ben. I think he should be celebrating anyway, you know. I just want to clarify a few points to the response. I know we've sort of covered this already, but the low borrowing rates currently enjoyed are as a result of market conditions. You know, we don't actually set them. You just happen to fall lucky with at the present time. When the Swansea administration, or as you actually called it, the Lib Dem independent administration, borrowed, market rates were much higher. Additionally, the monies borrowed were as a main result of the previously Labour administration neglecting the maintenance of public building, i.e. the Leisure Centre and the Guildhall. Excuse me, the Leisure Centre and the Guildhall. In essence, we were forced into that borrowing. You actually, in your reply, actually said repayments on borrowing are fully covered for the next 8 years. This is going to be as a result of monies being transferred into the...
What's the question?
Confident. Well, I'm actually making some points to clarify as a response. Monies transferred in the capital equalisation reserve, monies that really could have been put into other services. I'm disappointed really with regards to the response with regards to the statement saying the Lib Dems have opposed the city deal.
as part of the city deal, Swansea have and will have borrowed the largest sum of monies in their history, more than all our regional partners actually put together. It's only right that the scheme is scrutinised, as it will have an impact on the people of Swansea for many years. It actually mentions about risk as well, no risk and so on. I take a little, well, not offence at it really, but just to clarify, there's always a risk to every project, and I hope really the leader will agree that, there's a risk actually to this project. We've got risk registers, and there are risk registers for all the city deal projects. We want it to succeed at the end of the day, but really, I think we need to take account that it's not a negative, that, we want to identify all the risks. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Point of order, Chairman. There was not a question in that. It was just a ramble by Councillor Jeff Jones. And it's a question time, not Councillor Randall.
Yeah. Okay, Chair, if I come back on that, look, I applaud Councillor Jones's ability to read a pre-prepared script. I didn't detect a question in there, but I'll answer the points he raises anyway. More than happy to do that. I think on his last point about risk, I think if he reads my answer carefully, what I've said is we've locked the borrowing in at a set rate, reducing the risk for 50 years. So there is no way that rate can go up or down. It's fixed. So therefore, the risk in terms of what it'll cost, they are set costs. And of course, if we find ourselves in a position where we could repay it earlier, we could choose to do that. The other points, I mean, I think, Councillor Jones talks about they were being forced into borrowing. No, you weren't. Absolutely, you weren't. And I absolutely reject the fact that you had to do the things that you chose to do. You trotted out a number of times that you had to build the metro. You didn't have to do that. You chose to go ahead with the metro in the way that you did. You chose to dig up the Kingsway and spend lots of time turning it into a very confusing system, which absolutely wiped out businesses along the Kingsway. We've put that mistake right. On top of that, of course, we inherited a position where children's services were in an absolutely appalling state because they've gone into special measures. We are now one of the strongest and most respected children's services in Wales.
With respect.
On top of that, of course, the IT estate that we inherited from you, which you chose again not to invest in, was underfunded, and you've taken a decision very quickly to outsource Swansea jobs to Scotland. Not only did you do away with in-house IT services, you outsourced them to Scotland, moving jobs from Swansea to Scotland, undermining the opportunities for the people of Swansea. Now, I applaud the investment that's gone into the Guildhall. It's an important area, and I'm glad to see that done. And I'm glad, actually, that when we came into power in 2012, we actually moved the political base back into the Guildhall, so people actually used the building again, having spent all that money on it. Now, I'm not sure, because I've never heard Councillor Jones say it, that were they to be in power, that they would have signed up to the city deal. I'm not sure that would have happened, because I've never seen a statement to say that they would have gone along with the arrangements put in place by the UK government for deals, because it isn't a grant handout scheme, the city deal. It is a collaboration whereby the local authorities have to put money in together with the national governments, together with the private sector. It is not something you can get unless you put money in. We were very clear that we were prepared to invest because we wanted to create a better Swansea. We wanted to see things happen in Swansea because people, the public, were fed up of things not happening in Swansea. 8 years of drift, 8 years of non-delivery. So we are very proud of what we're delivering in Swansea. And I have to say, Councillor Jones, yes, it's perfectly right that you ask questions from a scrutiny perspective, etc. But I really do not think that you would have taken the decision to sign up to the city deal. And I believe if that was the case, we wouldn't have seen £1.3 billion worth of investment coming to Swansea and the region. I do not believe you would have done it, and we would have missed out on huge opportunities.
I think that is something you'll never know. And, you know, just to clarify the metro.
Well, you can answer it now, would you?
Can I interrupt there, because there's a couple of things that Councillor Rob Stewart has said that needs to be corrected. You did not take over a failing children's services, definitely not.
Questions, please. Point of
Okay,
order.
I will, Councillor Burton-Shaw. I will ask the question.
Member is trying to speak.
We
can't hear him, and people are just talking over the top.
Everyone, please.
Be quiet then.
Councillor David Phillips.
Sorry, I need to clarify some of the things that Councillor Stewart said, because it's not right.
It's not you've had the opportunity. You've asked 2 questions, and you're.
I understand that, presiding officer, but Councillor Stewart has said things which are totally wrong, and they need to actually be corrected. And that is that one about children's services. You did not take over a failing children's services. Definitely not. We had a problem. We were put in special measures. Can't deny that. And we actually put a lot of investment, time and effort into making sure that it was right for the future. So let's be fair about that. I'm not going to go back on the metro because I'm fed up of arguing about the metro, and I hope when you put a metro in, you don't have the same issues that I've had with it and the blame that's been attached to it, because that's beyond a joke. But let us be bluntly honest. The money was borrowed. Yes, we borrowed it to do projects like the Bulls Hall and the leisure centre. All that. That's besides the point. It was done, and we borrowed it at the rates of return. But I think you need to be correct about what you're saying about children's services, and that is a wrong thing that you said. Thank you, presiding member. I think it is important to clarify that.
Presiding member, if you'd allow me, presiding member, I'm happy to say that Councillor Holly responded to children's services being in special measures, and that there was a reaction to that, which we would expect. But I'm also very pleased that he took the decision to allow the setting up of a special scrutiny committee chaired by Mark Giles to help recover the children's services position. And I really do pay tribute to the work that was done by Councillor Mark Giles and the scrutiny committee at the time to help get children's services into a better position. What I did say was, since 2012, children's services continue to go from strength to strength, and we are very pleased that we have now one of the best and strongest children's services in Wales.
Yeah, it was at a good foundation.
Right. Councillor David Phillips, please. David?
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't aware we were going into a debate, but there we are. A couple of the issues that I wanted to raise in my question 15 minutes ago have already been raised by the leader. But if I could just go over that again. Would the leader not agree that it's a bit rich of the leader of the opposition to talk about this administration putting the well-being of future generations at risk when the children's services under their administration actually was put into special measures, and it was only assisted out of special measures, referring to the item earlier on about the non-participation of the Liberal Democrats in scrutiny in the policy board, because of the involvement of the opposition parties, Mark Giles, Paxton Hood-Williams, and indeed myself and other members of the council. And for Councillor Jones to talk about scrutiny is also a bit rich when their disastrous Service at Swansea programme, when it came to council to talk about it, was being held in secret. And because the opposition parties would have nothing to do with it, the whole of the opposition party, the Labour group and the Conservative group, were reported to the Ombudsman. It's a bit rich for two people to talk about two things when their behaviour in office was exactly the opposite of what they're claiming that we should be doing now.
Yes, Councillor Phillips, I absolutely agree. And I do pay tribute to you, because I know you were heavily involved in getting the administration at the time to agree to set up that special scrutiny committee. And I think the work that was done there to recover the position, because it was a real, it did huge damage to Swansea's reputation to have children's services in special measures, especially for the staff who were working incredibly hard to try and support children in Swansea. And I'm pleased to say that the work that's been done since then, with Councillor Christine Richards, the work that she did for a long time as Children's Services Cabinet Member, Councillor Elliot King, And I think the work that's been done to turn our children's services into something which is a well-respected, strong service which supports children in Swansea should be something we should be incredibly proud of as a council. And you are right, Councillor Phillips, the Service at Swansea programme was an absolute disaster. It didn't deliver what it set out to do. There were huge savings that were attached to that service, which never materialised. And again, how any administration in Swansea can, support the export of jobs, local jobs to Scotland is beyond me. We have done everything we can to stimulate the economy in Swansea, to create the right environment for people to invest in Swansea, to create jobs in Swansea, and that's where we're bearing the fruit. And again, the city deal didn't happen by accident. We had to negotiate very hard with the UK government to get the city deal for our region. £1.3 billion worth of investment in one decision, and I think that dwarfs anything that the previous administration were able to secure in their whole 8 years.
Councillor Peter Jones.
Yes, thank you, presiding member. I've great respect for Councillor Holly. I have to say, this is the silliest way of interpreting the Wellbeing Act that I've ever experienced. I was one of those back in 2014 in a previous role who helped to develop this act and was involved in the thinking that led up to its development. This is incredibly silly as a way of trying to use this act to suggest that what the council has been doing in terms of ensuring a good financial future, in terms of going for lower interest rates, borrowing at those rates and so forth, is somehow going to prejudice future generations. It is not going to prejudice the future generations, it's going to advantage them. I'm looking at the Act now. I dug it out as this discussion got underway. This is not compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The way we're using the resources now will help to ensure that future generations can make best use of the resources, the facilities, the infrastructure, and so on, that our low interest borrowing rate now is enabling the council to do. And when I look at the wellbeing goals, the first of which are prosperous Wales, which of course is all about the economy and so on and so forth. And I read there that what the Act is trying to do is to generate wealth and provide employment opportunities, allowing people to take advantage of the wealth generated through securing decent work. And that's what the council is doing in its approach in this matter. So therefore, to suggest that we're in breach of the Wellbeing Act is quite frankly ridiculous. What the council is doing is acting very much in line with what the Wellbeing Act is trying to do. And I just can't understand why Councillor Holly, and for that matter Councillor Jeff Jones, seem to think that what the council is doing is infringing the Act. It isn't. It's a sensible way of using the Act. It's a sensible interpretation of the Act. I suggest, Councillor Holly, that, I hate to use the word again, but what you're doing is quite frankly silly. Thank you, Chair.
Peter, the purpose of this part of the agenda is for members to ask questions of the leader. The question is posed to the leader's responding. If you need to say anything, you need to ask the leader a question.
Apologies, presiding member. Perhaps I could ask the leader, does he agree with me that what Councillor Holly is doing is quite frankly a silly interpretation of the Wellbeing Act? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I 100% agree with you, and I think you put it very eloquently.
Thank you.
Councillor Terry Hennigan. Terry? No.
Would the leader agree with me that when the administration, I'm being polite about that, when they pushed the stock transfer, the first 3 years they'd have to borrow 100 million and 300 million, and for the next 10 years another 100 million. When you talk about borrowing, it always comes back and bites you on the. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hennigan, for reminding me of the Lib Dems' attempt with the independents to try and disenfranchise all of our tenants by selling off the housing stock. Now, the only reason that Councillor Lewis and the team have been able to do such a dramatic delivery in terms of improving our council homes, in terms of building better council homes, is because Labour members fought that decision tooth and nail together with the tenants. And we've been proved to be right, because it is absolutely right that we remain the largest stock holding authority in Wales, and that we've put in record levels of investment to improve homes across Swansea. And the work that Councillor Lewis has been doing together with the officers is absolutely fantastic. And I know the residents are really pleased with their new kitchens, bathrooms, the boilers, and all of the investment that's going in to make our homes better. And of course, our ambitious plans to build homes over the next 10 years, to build the next generation of energy efficient homes, which is going to absolutely be needed in the next few years as the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis hits home. You know, the homes that we've built where people's heating bills could be less than £70 a year is going to be of real help to families in Swansea and residents in Swansea who are lucky enough to be able to live in our new homes. But yes, you're absolutely right, Councillor Hennigan, and I know you led the campaign at the time as well to keep our council homes run and maintained by the council.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Okay, question 2, Councillor Mike Day. Please, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member, and might come as a surprise, but I've got some supplementary questions to ask on the answer. Thank the Cabinet Member for the response. Just 1 or 2 points of clarification and issues I'd like to follow up. I suppose I basically have 3 questions. The first is that I asked what are the plans for this home in the future. Reading the response, could the Cabinet Member confirm that there are no plans in the short term to dispose of this home, because it's playing such an important part in our ability to support our colleagues in health care? And secondly then is what thinking has been done about the use of volunteers to support our own services in terms of social care? I appreciate that there's a great deal being done by voluntary organisations already, but I wondered if there's a possibility of engaging more with volunteers in providing services. And the last point is that I wondered whether the Cabinet Member and Leader would join with me in thanking our own staff, as we've done for other members of the Council, for their work during the pandemic and the sterling work that they've been doing in providing that level of support. And I wondered whether there was any way in which we could perhaps reward them in some way, like, for example, granting 1st of March as a day of holiday. Obviously, we couldn't allow all our social care staff to go off at the same time, but an opportunity for them to have that as a recognition of the thanks that we would want to offer them.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Thanks for those questions. I will leave an element of the last one to somebody else to answer, but I will say that I have in the past, and I will continue to repeat, my absolute gratitude to the social care staff who are both social workers and social care providers, both within the council and the commission ones as well, who have proved themselves to be key workers absolutely throughout this pandemic, and we as a council and Swansea as a whole owe them a great debt of gratitude to going into situations where certainly initially nobody really knew what the outcomes were going to be, and that they knew that they had a duty to provide care, felt that they had a duty, and I'm full of awe and admiration for the way they carried out that and continued a service throughout all this time. I mean, we didn't know how long it would last, and none of us thought it would last this long, but we are still doing it and still working hard, and we haven't come out of the last spike yet for Omicron, and they're still providing an absolutely amazing first-class service to people in serious need right across Swansea. So I have not in the past, and I never will hesitate to thank them, and I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, would do exactly the same.
as far as the plans for the short term, we're not making sort of plans. Our plans for the short term are currently underway, and that they were to deal with the Omicron spike in infections and how we got through that. It would be a luxury to be thinking about the medium and long term. We hope we will be thinking about the medium long term in the not too distant future. But there are certainly what we have, and Parkway has played its role in that, is looking at how we can deal with the current pandemic. There will be a time to review the situation. I think we need to let people have a time of stability and recovery and recuperation, all those staff that we just mentioned, before we have any major change. But the pandemic has made us look at the way we provide services, the way we work with partners in health and the voluntary sector and others in the independent sector, and how we provide services to the most vulnerable. And it's also made the most vulnerable and their families look at what kind of services they want from the council and other providers as well. So I think that they are a very important element in how we plan to go forward with social care in Swansea and across Wales. So no, I think it would be our short-term plans are how we deal with the pandemic beyond, and so they mean that Parkway, although it hasn't been used in this instance, is there as a possible. We've managed to increase the provision within Bonamine House and within T1R and other sites, as well as the health board purchasing sites in the beds in the independent sector to help us get through this spike. And we haven't used. And to be honest, I think I said it in the answer to the question. The main difficulty has been having the staff to be able to man any extra facilities, or staff any extra facilities, should I say? Apologies, and not just have the facilities, but we needed to keep as many strings as we could to our bow throughout this, and Parkway has been one of them. And then you said, and I mentioned SCBS. To answer your second question, yeah, we have been using the voluntary sector intensively and increasingly closely. We've been working with them throughout this pandemic. Certainly, they proved an absolute godsend at the beginning. People volunteering as well from the general public, as well as the organisations around Swansea on the ground. It was very close working with SCBS and the various organisations that make up that body that helped us get through the isolation and the lockdowns in the first part of the pandemic, and we will continue to be very grateful for the support in prevention and in providing the facilities in communities to help people reduce their isolation to the voluntary sector going forward. So I mean, I have thanked the staff, but I extend that thanks to the voluntary sector and the way they stepped up during the pandemic as well. I don't know if the leader's got anything to add about a reward or anything.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I absolutely concur with Councillor Child's comments in terms of our workforce. They have again been outstanding. Just to add then, because I won't repeat what Councillor Child said, but in terms of thanking our staff and for all the efforts that they've done, we've been in discussions with the heads of the trade unions, and we are preparing a package of reward for staff, and we hope to be able to provide the details during the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Peel.
Yes. Yes. Sorry?
It's questions to the executive. Are you going to answer or not?
Yes, Councillor Child said, I don't know if anybody else wants to answer to the part I was going to answer on behalf from the third sector, because that sits in my portfolio. Just to say to Councillor Day that yes, they've been very, very involved since day one. They've been part of the emergency response to COVID, and they are still part of it. And with a compact agreement as well in place, there's a terrific amount of work going on out there to support the services, and many projects, like when people are being discharged from hospital now, they're trying to get them out a little bit earlier, but they need that support. It may be helping getting food in, help sometimes just making a cup of tea, all the different things that are going on out there, and many projects around loneliness and isolation and everything, which is really crucially important. So just to reassure you, they've been absolutely fantastic out there supporting us, and can't praise SCVS and all the third sector enough.
Thank you, Robson. Leader, do you want to say something else? No, you're okay. Okay, question 3 then. Councillor Mike Day, any supplementaries made in question 3?
No supplementaries, thank you.
Thank you. Question 4, Councillor Jill Earnshaw.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I thank the Cabinet Member for response? But further to a question that was raised earlier in public questions, can the Cabinet Member tell us whether further investment is planned in Penderry Wood?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you to Councillor Burton-Shaw for the question. Yes, absolutely, there is further investment. There is the opportunity for joint venture on some of the development sites which are within the ownership of the HRA. But I think Councillor Burton-Shaw, Councillor Hennigan and Councillor Morris will be particularly interested in the investment that is planned at Tudno and Emrys. The residents are long overdue. Unfortunately, the development has been placed on hold due to the pandemic. But as soon as possible, and I'm keen that this is as soon as possible, we intend to engage with ward members, and immediately, as soon as we are able to, go out to consultation with those residents and tenants. And there is significant investment plans to improve Tudno and Emrys. So I'm very pleased to confirm that to Councillor Burton-Shaw, and I look forward to meeting with the ward members and engaging with the tenants and residents to provide high energy efficient homes. They are some of the most poorly energy efficient homes that I think we've got currently in our council stock, and are in desperate need of improvement. And I am anxious, as I know the Labour administration are, to get on with the development and get on with the work as soon as we possibly can. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Okay, that takes up our 30 minutes. We now need to move on to the last item on our agenda this evening, and that's notice of motion on the national energy crisis. And I understand that the proposer is Councillor Andrea Lewis. Andrea, Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Normally I would pride myself on bringing positive reports.
Sorry, Presiding Officer, could I come in here? I've had problems with this hand up and down lock. Can I apologise? I think I should probably have declared a personal interest at the start of the meeting on this motion. I am aware that the Prime Minister in London has expressed his opposition to reducing the VAT on heating on the grounds he thinks targeted means tested benefits are the way to deal with this. I have to say I am one of many people born before September 1955 who receives a winter fuel payment, a universal benefit, without us having to apply for it. And in that case, I have to declare a personal interest because I am receiving a universal benefit by virtue of being a pensioner.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Can we just clarify that with the monitoring officer?
Thank you.
In receipt, need to declare.
Do you want to take a block declaration of personal interest? If anyone else wants to declare the same personal interest, we'll take a block declaration.
Okay, those all in receipt of the heating allowance.
And can I just remind you all to make sure you fill the forms in as well? Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rayner, for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Lewis again.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. As I was saying, I normally pride myself on bringing some really positive reports and good news to this council. However, I have to say this evening, I am deeply saddened and extremely worried that I have to bring this national energy crisis notice of motion to council this evening. I think it's appalling, utterly shameful and simply shambolic that in 2022 we have to address a cost of living crisis. We know families have been squeezed. Absolutely, we don't know what post-pandemic is going to look like, but we know that there's significant people who've lost their jobs, have lost their income, and the cost of living has gone up thanks to Brexit and the pandemic. People are now being asked to choose whether they should heat or eat, thanks to this energy crisis when it's introduced in April, and it does deeply worry me. I have to say, something I am proud of this council's track record to date of trying to counteract the rising energy bills. We have, as was mentioned earlier, invested heavily in council homes, making them more energy efficient, particularly our new builds with renewable technologies included. We've put solar on school roofs, which should hopefully help counteract and mitigate the rise in these energy bills. We have the refit programme, which includes other council properties and public sector buildings that we own. We have got approval from Cabinet for a solar farm, and I'm sure the leader would like to comment on Blue Eden and the positive impact that project will have for the people of Swansea. We also help administer grants, and we have the NEST Welsh Government initiative in terms of boilers and energy efficiency, EcoFlex, Warm Homes Fund, and I know there's excellent work going on in the housing team and also poverty and prevention team in providing invaluable expertise, support and advice. And more recently, I'm delighted that we've taken the opportunity through the Economic Recovery Fund, where we committed £25,000 to supporting the Energy Awareness Hub on working together with the Environment Centre. Switched On is going to provide some impartial, independent advice, and we're working closely with other partners who are supporting that as well. And this council has supported Welsh Government's payment of £100, which has been administered for over 30,000 households. And so we're doing everything that we possibly can, but we can't get away from the fact that this initiative is going to impact not only on every single household across Swansea, across Wales, across the UK, but also every business, every council, and this is going to have a major negative impact. And so I formally propose the notice of motion. I will be asking Chairman in my summing up for a named vote this evening, and I fully support the notice of motion asking that Council calls upon the leader to write to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer and call for immediate implementation and action for the following: a reduction in the VAT, an introduction of a new lower price cap for households, increase in the availability of grants to encourage more renewable energy generation and installations, and a windfall tax on energy companies to fund a UK-wide grant scheme which would help households in addition to the £100 that Welsh Government have implemented. But if I can, Presiding Member, with your indulgence, just to have a little historical reminder of VAT on energy bills. VAT was introduced in 1973 and was capped at 0% at that time. It was a Conservative government that raised the VAT on energy bills to 8%, which they wanted to introduce 17.5%, but thanks to opposition's pressure, that was capped at 8%. When a Labour government came in, we reduced that to 5%, and the only reason we did that was the minimum we could reduce it to, thanks to the EU rules. And now that we're no longer part of the EU, one of the positive impacts of that is we have the power and the gift through UK government to remove that 5% completely. And that decision has been turned down by this government. So I feel very strongly about this, presiding member. I'm deeply worried about the impact this is going to have on households who have been unbelievably squeezed already. And I believe that the leader is going to formally second. Thank you, presiding member. And I warmly welcome comments from colleagues this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. The leader, you can either formally second it, Robert.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in now, Chair, if I could. Absolutely second. And I've also raised my hand to support Councillor Lewis's named vote. In terms of the motion before us, I really thank Councillor Lewis for bringing this for us to discuss this evening. Clearly, the government in London really do not care. They've had an opportunity to take action to avoid not just the energy crisis, but the cost of living crisis that is now upon families across the UK. We know that they have taken some measures. They've removed £20 a week from the lowest paid families in the country, cutting their universal credit. That's the measure they took to try and help families. Well, if that's helped, then they should hang their heads in shame. They have done absolutely nothing. Labour in Westminster tried to move a motion to reduce VAT as quickly as possible. It's a very blunt tool, VAT, but it's something that could have been done quickly, providing immediate help to families. And what did the Tories do? Vote against it. They do not want to help. They do not care. They provided over the biggest rise in food banks we have ever seen. And the approaching removal of the energy cap will mean that families across the UK will not see their energy prices rise. They'll see them double or treble. And that will plunge many, many families into terrible decisions about whether they heat their homes or whether they put food on the table. This is what we have come to as a country. The Tories in London should hang their heads in shame. There was supposed to be a Brexit dividend. Well, is this a Brexit dividend delivered by the Tories? Is this the deal that Boris Johnson signed on behalf of the UK? Is this what he imagined we would be 2 years after Brexit? Councillor Lewis is absolutely right. There is further flexibility in VAT outside of Europe, but the Tories have failed to exercise that flexibility. They've left VAT at a higher level. So all the rhetoric that they put out there in terms of Brexit has proven to be hollow. And we know that many families are facing now inflation running away, where their wages are not keeping pace with the bills that they're having to face. This is a Tory Britain. This is the effects of what happens when you elect an incompetent Tory government. And I am absolutely proud to support the motion that Councillor Lewis has fetched this evening.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Biddy Jones.
Yes, thank you, presiding member. The notice of motion includes the word crisis, and rightly so. And I, of course, shall be fully endorsing this motion when we come to vote on it later tonight. But what worries me, crisis is a short-term concept, 1, 2, 3 years at worst. I think we're facing a much longer-term problem. And this is the difficulty that we face. This isn't going to go away. In 2024 or whenever, energy prices are not going to come collapsing back down again, and we can resume a pre-COVID economy as far as the energy position is concerned. I've been looking at some United States research into energy pricing. It's very complicated, and I'm not going to bore anybody. I'm not sure I fully understood it myself. But what did come through to me was that economists looking at the long-term prospects for energy, and they were looking in particular at oil and coal, both of which, of course, we want to see reduced for climate change reasons. Looking at oil and coal, they could see no long-term reduction. And part of the problem, of course, is the market-based approach that globally we have to managing the planet's energy resources. Markets may work for some, they will work for the wealthy, they do not work for most. And of course, the COVID pandemic has been produced as offered as the main explanation for the chaos that now exists in market-based approaches to energy management and the costs that flow from that. Well, that may well be so. And certainly from the US research, it's quite clear that the consequences of trying to recover from COVID in the meantime is reducing supply whilst demand is rising, and hence the price hikes. So we're facing, however, a longer term problem that's not going to be, as I say, I fully support the measures proposed, but we need a longer term solution. Energy should be publicly owned, presiding member. This shouldn't be a matter for markets. It shouldn't be a matter for profiteering. It should be a matter of basic public service. I appreciate we're looking at a global situation, but nevertheless, I would hope that a future government in this country will take a lead in bringing this sector back into public ownership, so that at least we can manage our energy position better, and along with far more investment in renewables, in solar, in wind, in tidal, we can have a much better energy market here in the United Kingdom, and obviously I hope others will follow. So yes, I support this motion, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we're facing a much longer term problem, which is going to affect everybody, our families, our children, our grandchildren. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, Chris, apologies. I see your name is in the list. I should have called you second as leader of the opposition. Chris, sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Not a problem, presiding member. I'd just like to say I fully support this notice of motion. You know, at the end of the day, we are, and I'm taking Councillor Peter Jones's point about being in crisis. I'm not sure what the future holds for energy prices at all. And I don't think any of us do, but, you know, I fully support, and I know everybody else that I know supports this notice of motion.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Field.
Thank you, presiding member. It is a sad day to have to see this notice of motion before us. As a local authority, our poverty team have been at the coalface in tackling poverty in Swansea. We are present at providing fuel grants to the food banks and third sector organisations to help families who find themselves having to choose between food or fuel. In Hartlepool, in the by-election, a Conservative voter was interviewed and said, yes, the Tories have done us proud here in Hartlepool. We now have 5 food banks. I will leave you to ponder the irony. Thank you.
You're on mute, Jess.
Did you call me in, presiding member? I can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, presiding member. Thank you to colleagues for bringing this important motion forward to council today. As others have said, I'm deeply worried about the impact of this impending energy crisis and how it's going to compound the existing cost of living crisis for so many households in Swansea and across the UK. This crisis and the government's inaction is obviously going to affect us all, but the Tories' callous indifference regarding the impact that this will have on some of the most vulnerable in our society is just criminal. Single parents, pensioners and families with one or more disabled people, these are the ones who are set to be most disproportionately hurt by price rises, eating into their already meagre disposable incomes. These are typically households with higher energy needs because of children in the household or needing to run equipment to support disabilities. Their homes are more likely to be more poorly insulated, and they are also less likely to be able to work more hours if they're able to find a job at all. This is an equality issue which needs addressing. Yesterday, I met with Scrutiny to follow up on the Equality Scrutiny Inquiry, which I chaired before taking up my role in the Cabinet. And it's now being chaired by the leader of the Conservatives, Councillor Lyndon Jones. And I was going to ask him to give a personal plea today, but sadly he's not here, because he spoke so much yesterday about how he learnt in the process about equalities and how important this issue is. So I was hoping that he would take that message back to the leadership in London, but he's not here to do that, sadly. All I can say is that thank goodness for our Welsh Labour government in Cardiff, our Welsh Labour administration here in Swansea, and we're doing all we can to mitigate these impacts in the short term by putting cash in people's pockets with these extra payments. And as Councillor Jones was just referring to, that we're serious about long-term change for future generations, building new energy efficient homes, investing in clean domestic renewable energy to reduce our reliance on foreign fossil fuels, regenerating our local economy to get more money in people's pockets, piloting a universal basic income in Wales, for example. But we don't have the power or the money to do more, and only Westminster holds the keys to really unlocking this problem for our community. So I really hope this motion is supported unanimously across the council.
Jennifer Rayner.
Thank you, presiding member. I wholeheartedly support any of the comments that have already been made, and especially Peter Jones drawing our attention to this isn't short term, this is going to be an ongoing problem. But looking at the short term and how we offer support, I'm really pleased at the work our council is doing. Councillor Lewis and Councillor Pugh have listed what's going on in their departments. This evening, via the education to me as a governor, I got a newsletter asking us to share this information, which takes you straight to a page on the council website of how and where and what grants are available to people. But this is where I feel uncomfortable. It's all right for some of us to get a universal benefit, presumably because pensioners vote. But many other people are struggling with means tested. And no matter what the Tories say, they have a huge disincentive in supporting poor families. We've heard the Tories say, oh, taxes must be cut. Shocking. How possibly can they afford it? And yet for people on universal credit or work-based benefits, they can only keep 55 pence now of what they earn. That's supposed to be an incentive. And yet if we tried to take that off somebody off £100,000 a year, there would be riots from the Tory party. This isn't proper Toryism. This is going soggy and liberal. There is a huge injustice in the way we look at society and how we support one another. And I think, we should be proud of what we are doing. But the critical thing is the government has to change. It either has to change its policies or the makeup of the government has to be changed. They have come up with no suggestions whatsoever about how to assist people struggling with fuel increases this winter, or even worse, next winter and the winter after. We all know there are huge structural issues with providing the basics of getting heating, lighting, water, transport around this country. And yet what do we have? We just have to pay more. And as Andrea's pointed out, we left Europe giving us the freedoms to take decisions. Yet, are those decisions being taken? No. We keep that. To reduce that would not be fair, because it would mean people who don't need it would be getting a benefit. And yet every November, December, £100, £300 goes out to people who were born before 1955. It is really not fair. So I fully support this motion. I am proud that it's come before us, and I'm very proud of every department setting to support our families on this, because it is a nightmare. Do you stay warm? Do you eat? Can you cook? Or do you eat? Can you wash your children's clothes? Can you dry your children's clothes? Do you keep your children off school because they haven't got clean, dry clothes to wear? None of this seems to enter the Conservative government in Westminster, and sadly, it doesn't seem to enter the thought patterns of some of our Conservative councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Leslie Bolton. Les? Leslie?
Les has been able to hasn't been able to unmute Des, so I don't know whether she put something in the chat.
She's trying, right. You're unmuted, Leslie, please. Can you hear us?
She's indicated that she can't mute, unable to speak.
She had problems yesterday as well, Des. She can't unmute her mic at all, so I don't know how we're going to get around it, to be honest.
It messaged me to ask that I would call her in. I've called her in, and we cannot do any more.
No.
Hi, Chair. Leslie has put something in the chat.
Yeah.
Can I read it?
Yes.
She says, providing member, my mic will not switch on. So please, can I make this point? Many people are already in the situation where they're having to choose between eat or heat. Unless the UK government is prepared to do something to help, I dread to think what effect the fuel increase will have on so very many families. End of statement.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thanks.
Councillor David Hopkins, Deputy Leader.
Yeah, thanks, Presiding Member. Unfortunately, I'm not pleased to support this report. In fact, I think it's one of the worst things that we've had to do. This notice of motion, I welcome backing it. It's a shame we're totally in this position. We're still going through a pandemic. Some of, when you look at the biggest growth area throughout Wales has probably been the food banks and everything else that's gone on the things we've done. I can't believe that a Tory government can turn their back and refuse to come in to assist the most vulnerable and make more people vulnerable. In Swansea at this particular time, we're invested in jobs. We're trying to get people out of poverty. We're trying to get people out of poverty. And what are we going to do? Put more people into poverty. Coming out of industry, I can remember when I was in a recycling factory using lots of gas, when we looked at a 3% increase in gas, that meant the difference of losing contracts. So the industry is going to suffer, putting more people unemployed. What I would like to say is that unemployment will grow. The Tory government should be ashamed of themselves. In SW1, they can afford a wine fridge. People in SA1 can't afford electric to run it. So come on, please. We should be supporting the local people and really cut back on or sort this issue out with the VAT.
Thank you, David. Councillor Willie Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yeah, I'm personally very happy to support this motion. I do believe the UK government should and could be doing a lot more with regards to this. So I personally would be more than happy to make representation on this, and Lyndon has a very good reason for not being here, but I'm sure he would also support this. But I haven't spoke to him on that because he's not able to be with us tonight. I do think though, Peter Jones made a point earlier about this being a very big problem and an ongoing problem and a long-term problem, and I think that does bring in a lot of bigger issues that I think it's a bit of a stretch to just blame the government. There is a lot of supply supply and demand issues, the fact that it's a cold winter as well. All these things do add up to what we are experiencing is an energy crisis, and there's many factors that do play into this, and which is the reason for the high prices we're seeing in energies. But more than happy to support this motion, and we'll make representation whenever possible inside the party. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Will. We appreciate that. Councillor Christine Richards. First.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, I wasn't going to say anything, but I feel myself forced to speak on in support of this motion. It seems to me that this is just another thing on the whole heap of despondency that is building up for our most vulnerable families in the UK. It may not be not just another party, but it's another kick in the teeth. Councillor Rayner is absolutely right about the unfairness and the injustice in the UK. We've been reminded earlier as well about the £20 cut in universal credit, and this week we've also been reminded by Jack Monroe, that campaigner. She's highlighted the disproportionate effect that on the lower paid, where basic food prices for some items have tripled in price, affecting those who can least afford to have that price hike. I never thought I'd hear Sam Vines and Terry Pratchett mentioned in economic debates, but in that particular, there was a book written by Terry Pratchett, and his character Sam Vines explains how the poor always end up paying far more for boots than the rich because they can only afford cheap boots that don't last as long. And I think the whole Sam Vines thing is also applied to food prices for very basic items. On the same day, we hear that the shambolic UK government have failed to protect around £5 billion of public money on the bounce back loan scheme. We as a local authority are asking for, which seems to me a relatively simple thing that would ease the burden for many, many people in our country. Cutting the VAT on energy. Throughout the pandemic, over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge, I believe, waste in public funds going to the friends and partners of the UK government. With the who can forget the was it the trace, that failed tracing system. This government has spent billions and billions of public money, and yet it takes 20 quid off those that can least afford it, and refuses to do anything about fuel VAT. I fully support this motion. I think everybody in this chamber should, in this virtual chamber, should fully support this motion. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you, Chris. Finally, Councillor Kerry Evans. Kerry.
Yeah, thanks, presiding member. We save the best till last, is it? Anyway, just following on from it, obviously I support the motion, because it goes without saying, really. And I think it seems a bit of a strange thing to bring up, but when I was a child, I remember a film called Carry On Up the Khyber, which I'm sure, given the demographic of councillors, we all remember that one. And the scene that struck me was the scene where the ruling classes had a party while outside they were besieged and being bombarded. And we've got a government, I think, that's better at organising parties than organising anything else. But that's besides the point. I mean, what I really wanted to say was that, I take Will Thomas's point. Councillor Will Thomas is right to point out, actually, that this energy crisis is about much more than just because the government that we have at this moment in time. That, you know, it is a complex issue, and it is an issue, as Peter Jones rightly pointed out, that's been building up for many years, and it'll be an issue that probably faces us for the foreseeable future. But the point is not, that is not the point really. I think perhaps Councillor Thomas might be, I don't put words into his mouth, might be missing the point slightly. The point is that we're in an extremely bad position to weather the storm, as it were, when it comes to this fuel increase. You know, we've had over 10 years, systematic underfunding or systematic cutting of funding to services for the most vulnerable. You know, we've seen child poverty increase massively since 2010. These are, if you just look at the Office of National Statistics on child poverty from what they were in 2009 to what they are today. You know, we're back at 1996 levels, and we all know what happened in 1997 to change that. And that was obviously a Labour government. You know, and the other things we've seen, Councillor Alison Pugh rightly referenced food banks. We're all of a certain age here. None of us are particularly young, but we all remember the other day or 5 minutes ago that there wasn't anything as known as a food bank. I remember a time when there was no food banks in Swansea or anywhere else that I was aware of, and now they're a fact of life. And I think the problem we've got a Conservative government that doesn't understand the interconnectedness of things. These things are all connected, and they don't get that. Yesterday, I was chairing the People Policy Development Committee. We've got Labour councillors and some excellent Conservative councillors who really contribute to that committee. And we were hearing presentations from officers telling us yesterday that a lot of their funding around the employability projects that Swansea run to some of the most vulnerable of the public, of the people that live here, of our residents in Swansea, are coming to an end. Their fund is coming to the end at the end of this year, and they still don't know what's happening with the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is a bit of a misnomer from the Tory government. The Shared Prosperity Fund, which is meant to replace the ESF fund that funds so many of our projects which support our vulnerable residents in Swansea. They have absolutely no idea, number one, when it's going to come out, number two, what it's going to look like, and number three, how much money it's going to involve. I mean, that is shambolic. And whether you are Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Independent, whatever, that is absolutely scandalous. And if you live in Swansea and represent the people of Swansea, it shouldn't matter what colour your rosette is, you should be just absolutely incandescent with rage with the UK government about that. You know, we were promised 300 million or whatever it was a week in the back of a bus for the NHS. We've not seen it. And time again, after 10 years of Conservative government, what we've seen is complete lack of preparedness, whether that's to do with COVID, whether it's to do with the fuel crisis, whether it's to do with the environment, or whether it's to do with public services in general. I mean, it is an absolute disgrace of a government. It's probably the worst government this country has ever seen. Certainly it's got the worst Prime Minister this government has ever seen. And it just goes to show what happens when you have people making policy that are so far removed from the consequences that they have absolutely no idea of the impact. So obviously I'll stop my rant there, but I'm obviously in favour of the motion, and I'm really glad to support it.
Thank you, Eric. Councillor Andrea Lewis to respond. You must be very heartened, Andrea, by the amount of support you've had from all members across the floor. Andrea?
Yeah. Thank you, Presiding Member, and I will take that right to respond. I am very grateful to colleagues for their positive support and comments tonight, but if I can just highlight some of them. Completely agree with Councillor Peter Jones. We should look at this as a long-term issue. I think investment in green energy and generation is critical. It's critical for Wales in order to make us sustainable and less reliant on other countries. And I hope that the UK government sits up and takes notice of that, given that they've withdrawn incentives for the public to have solar on their roofs. I think they really need to have a good hard look at themselves in terms of the incentives that they give, because they have the power to make change. I know Welsh Government have an appetite to do that, and I'm glad to live in Wales. Councillor Pugh is absolutely right to raise and to praise the poverty team and all the work that they've done, and in terms of supporting the food banks, but it is shameful. It's shameful 2022 that we have to rely on food banks in this day and age. Councillor Gibbard is absolutely right to highlight there will be some who are most disproportionately impacted in this crisis, and it is the people who are living the closest to the breadline. And I worry about those individuals and families and the impact that's going to have on them going forward. I am surprised to see a Conservative councillor on screen this evening at a work event without cheese and wine. Sorry, I'll take it to a more serious note. I do welcome the support, Councillor Thomas. I do think that they have the power to make a change, and I hope that the Tory councillors on this council will take note of the good work that Swansea Council are doing and feed that back to the UK government. I think they could have a lot to learn from us, and we have a track record to be rightly proud of. And Councillor Evans was right to raise the child poverty. It is scandalous and it is shameful in this day and age. And so, as promised, I will call for a named vote, presiding member, and I ask that members raise their hand to support that, and I thank them again for their contributions and support this evening.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, you've got the required numbers asking for a named vote. Of course, the vote is recorded anyway, Mr. Evans, isn't it?
It is, but the name one I'm still going through the reading. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I will go to the vote. I will say your name, and the only answer I want to hear is whether you're for, against, or abstaining. When I get you, Councillor Walton, if you're unable to mute, I will see what you pop into the chat to me. I'm aware that you're unable to unmute at the moment. Councillor Cyril Anderson. For. Councillor Peter. Councillor Peter.
Not here.
Check. Yeah, you gone. Okay. June Burtonshaw.
For.
Councillor Mark Child. He's gone. Councillor John Curtis.
For.
Councillor Nick Davis.
For.
Councillor Mike Day. Okay. Councillor Phil Downing. For. Councillor Ryland Doyle.
For.
Councillor Mike Dirk.
For.
Councillor Kerry Evans.
For.
Councillor Mandy Evans.
For.
Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald. Gone. Councillor Robert Francis Davis.
For.
Councillor Steve Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Louise Gibbard.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Councillor Kevin Griffiths. I think he's left. Yeah. Councillor Joe Hale. Councillor David Helliwell.
For.
Councillor Terry Hennigan.
For.
Councillor Chris Holly.
For.
Councillor Paxton Hood Williams.
For.
Councillor Beverly Hopkins.
For.
Councillor David Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Oliver James.
For.
Councillor Linda James.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
For.
Councillor Lyndon Jones, absent. Councillor Mary Jones. Not here. Councillor Matthew Jones.
For.
Councillor Peter Jones.
For.
Councillor Susan Jones.
For.
Councillor Elliot King.
4.
Councillor Eric Kirchner.
4.
Councillor Hannah Lawson.
4.
Councillor Andrew Lewis.
4.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Councillor Richard Lewis, I don't think he's here. No. Councillor Wendy Lewis.
4.
Councillor Clive Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Paul Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Irene Mann. 4. She's not here. Councillor Penny Matthews.
4.
Councillor Peter May.
4.
Councillor Hazel Morris. Not sure. Councillor David Phillips.
4.
Councillor Sharon Philpott.
4.
Councillor Sam Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Alison Pugh.
4.
Councillor Jane Rayner.
4.
Councillor Christine Richards.
4.
Councillor Kelly Roberts.
4.
Councillor Bridget Rowlands.
4.
Councillor Mary Sherwood.
4.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
4.
Councillor Robert Smith.
4.
Councillor, he's not here. Councillor Rob Stewart.
4.
Councillor Gareth Sullivan.
4.
Councillor Gloria Tanner. Not here. Councillor Thomas. 4. Councillor Graham Thomas.
4.
Councillor Mark Thomas.
4.
Councillor Will Thomas.
4.
Councillor Linda Taylor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Gordon Walker. 4. He's not here. Councillor Walton Knight, she's voted yes via the chat because her mic isn't working. Councillor Mike White.
4.
Thank you. That's 57 for, no against and no abstentions.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you very much. That concludes our business. Thank you all for attending. Declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you.